Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back home to USA Global TV and Radio, where today's show is Authentic Achievements. And our subject today is blending education and enterprise to improve life. And I'm delighted to be joined by the fabulous Professor Adam Bodison, OBE, who's the Chief Executive of the Association for Project Management, the chartered body setting the global standard for project profession. With a passion for innovation and impact, Adam highlights the vital role of project management in tackling today's complexities and driving future success. So without further ado, Adam, welcome.
Hi, Kim Adele. It's great to be here. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's great to have you here as well. I so enjoyed our last conversation, so I'm super excited for this one. So thank you for giving me your time again, and particularly on such an important topic, because I think sometimes we struggle, don't we, into how are we going to integrate some of these things? How do we apply them in the best way and ensure that they don't terrify us? Would that be fair?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We have a mantra that we use in the project profession. We talk about things don't go wrong, they start wrong. I think that thinking through at the outset of how we're actually going to get this stuff done is so important. So yeah, it's all about the planning. That's what I always say.
Oh, I love that. It's so true, isn't it? Because we can get ourselves lost. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but I've been involved in so many projects over the years, and the bit that we tend to not plan for well is the people element. And then unsurprisingly, it goes hideously wrong because the people either didn't know what they were supposed to be doing or hadn't been given permission to be part of the solution, or there was just lack of clarity and communication. Is that something you see a lot?
It is, and you know, it's really interesting. You know, anybody watching this, I would say to them, think back to any kind of change or project where it's gone really, really well, it was huge success, or one that's been a complete disaster. And ask yourself, what was it that made the material difference to the success or not of that particular change? Was it, you know, really effective processes? That'll be part of it. Or was it people? Was it an individual that really drove that change in the right way? As you say, engage with people in the right way, got people on board with that change, help them through it. I mean, change is uncomfortable. You know, not everybody likes it. Some people like it, but a lot of people find it difficult. So having a kind of guide through it is so important. And people make so much difference, particularly in a world where tech dominates so much. The role of people is just absolutely vital.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's sadly one of the ones that often is an afterthought. And it almost reminds me of, you know, and we see parents do it all the time. Why have you got to do this? Because I said so.
Well,
and I
yes.
see that quite a lot in projects. You know, why are we doing it? Because we said so. And it's like, well, they're not going to be brought on that journey, are they? Because actually you're going to feel included and valued and like you are respected. If you can't tell me why, then I'm not going to feel all of those things, am I? I'm going to feel like it's being done to me, not being done with me or for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny, you just reminded me, I used to be a mathematics teacher.
Right.
My first job was as a math teacher, and I used to get the question almost every lesson, Sir, when am I ever going to use this in real life? You know, what use is this going to be to me? And sometimes I just want to say, I can't really tell you at the moment because I don't know for sure. But I need you to learn it, right? And so I get that frustration. And in the end, what I did was I developed um, kind of maths in the real world, I think I called it. And for every single maths topic, I was able to give the students a reason why it was going to be helpful for them in the real world. And honestly, that one single act made the teaching of the maths much more straightforward because there was buy-in. People saw how it was useful. And by the way, sometimes the things I picked out in terms of what they'd be useful for were bizarre. So, sometimes I was like, you can use this type of math to do magic tricks. And, that was a good hook for people. They liked it, particularly children.
Oh, I love that. It reminds me, I went in recently to my little girl's careers day. And I started off my career as a hairdresser. And so I used that example when I was talking to the kids. As when I was your age, I was sat where you are going, I'm never going to need science. I'm never going to need maths. And, I can speak okay. So what's English going to do for me? I said, and then I became a hairdresser. Still didn't think I needed any of those. But I use science every day to mix the colour or to balance the chemicals. I use maths every day to organize the quantities that I needed. And I used English every day to do the ordering or the description. I said, so whilst you might not know it right now, because I didn't, trust me, when you get out the other side, you'll be amazed at how much you will use this in practical life. And as you say, just making it real for them got their buy-in. You could see them all like smirk a little bit with the whole, I didn't think I'd ever use this.
It's so true. I always think as well, you've got to love the job that you do. Absolutely love it. Don't just do a job that I've got to do this because it pays the bills job. And sometimes you have to do that to get to other things. But, if you can, choose a job that you love. You mentioned careers in schools. When I remember when I was in school as a student and I went to see the careers advisor who says, Adam, what job would you like to do when you grow up? And I was a logical kind of guy, right? As you know, I was a mathematician, right? So I said, well, look, you're a careers advisor. You know all of the jobs that are out there and available. What's good and what's not good. And you've chosen to be a careers advisor, right? So that must be the best job. So I said, I'd like to be a careers advisor. I was promptly thrown out of the office, I think partly because he probably thought I was taking the mickey. But I learned something from that conversation, and she talked to me about this afterwards. She said, "Look, Adam, every day I have to give people advice on how to get their dream job, and I don't like my job. It's okay, it pays the bills, it does what I needed to do, but I don't love it." So she said to me then, and I must have been 14 at the time, 15. She said, "Whatever you do, just pick a job that you love," and that's really stayed with me. And I hope I've been true to that in the different jobs that I've done.
Oh, that is such great advice, because I think very often I find that we're running away from what we've got. We're not running towards what we want. I made one of my biggest ever career disasters because of just that thing. I wasn't running towards what I wanted, my dream job. I was running away from the one I had that paid the bills and was okay, but was zapping my joy. And I went and got this other job, and I convinced myself it was going to be brilliant. And I even up sticks and moved 100 miles away and relocated. I mean, go big or go home. and I was there for 3 months, 2 of which were my notice period, because I hated every minute of it. Every minute of it. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the job, but it was running an admin team, and I wasn't used to that, and the pace wasn't fast enough. And so I realized that actually that's what I'd done. I'd not focused on what are the things that bring me joy? What are the things that I get to do every day that even if everybody else goes, really? You think that's fun? I'm like, yeah, for me, that's fun. Because that's what I need more of in my job. And so now and I help clients do this, is sit down and go, be really real with yourself on what are the things that you really enjoy doing. And also, what are the things that zap your energy, that make you go, oh, for me, filing is on the zap your energy list. I know it needs to be done, and as long as it's not more than 0.05% of my job, then I can get away with that, Adam. I can cope with that. It's not too much of a problem. But for some other people, my mum included, filing brings her joy. So that, there's jobs for everybody, isn't there? When we focus on what are the things where we know we're at our best, where we know we love it, because then, when you are doing every single day, you don't lose that momentum. You don't lose that joie de vie almost, isn't it? Going, yes, I get to go in today, and particularly in doing kind of what you're doing, not only just leading teams, but leading an organization that's leading a profession. You've got to really love that to get that passion out there, haven't you? To get people to buy into.
And it's one of the, it's one of the reasons I actually really wanted to become a CEO. It wasn't because I was particularly power mad or anything like that. It was because it's one of those few roles where you really get to choose how the job plays out, right? I mean, the CEO job itself is kind of a big copy and paste across many organizations, but it's the role that you get to decide what you keep and what you delegate. And if I look at my predecessors in my current role, they've done it very differently to me. And it's not to say that, they were right and I was wrong, or I'm right and they're wrong. It's just different. And I don't think you get that privilege in a lot of roles, but you do in a CEO role. And that's one of the reasons I love it.
Yeah, it is nice, isn't it? When you get that autonomy, and that opportunity to be able to shape the future, shape the thinking, create the the bit I loved when I've been CEO and that before and currently is you get to shape the culture, you get to set the tone, and open it up therefore for people to play their parts, to have some say in kind of what's going on. But that CEO role really is the one that gives you that opportunity, doesn't it? It gives you that chance to become corporately curious about the art of the possible. Where can we go? How can we do it differently? Not just differently for different sake, but differently because the world is always in evolution, isn't it? So, what works in one decade won't work in the next. And then a decade later, you'll go back and pick something up. It's like the dreadful 80s clothes. You hoped they stayed there, keep creeping back in. No, go back. But I think the same is true in the things we learn, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's why you started at the beginning of this conversation talking about education and enterprise, and it's one of the things I talk about. We've got to blend education and enterprise. I really like that because there's sometimes a view that educational organisations, whether they be schools or charities or kind of universities, that they're, because they're educational, that somehow they're not allowed to be commercial. Like commercial's like a dirty word, and I'm like, commercial doesn't mean like making loads of money for shareholders. Commercials, it's like just running a business well, so that it can grow and develop and help more people. That's okay. And equally, there's sometimes the opposite is true as well. In the really kind of corporate type organizations, there's almost sometimes this idea that the educational learning and development, that's all that fluffy stuff, which I know we have to do some of that, and so, but actually I think both of those are kind of fundamentally wrong in my mind. If you can get the best of the kind of the corporate side and the educational side, the education enterprise, and bring them together, something really magical happens. You get, as you say, an organization, I think you used the phrase corporately curious. I like that. You get that kind of curiosity that comes in, but you also get this ambition to want to grow and develop and learn more. People feel psychologically safe. They'll try things out. The whole kind of fail fast methodologies and so on. People will be prepared to take risks in the organization. And whilst they won't all pay off, you only need a few to pay off to really make a difference. In the words of Jack Black from School of Rock, one great rock show can change the world. One great business idea can make all the difference. Absolutely transformational.
Amazing. And that's so interesting, made me smile, because I get so many of my kind of quotes from films that you wouldn't expect to necessarily be there. You're like, they've always got a great message in there for us somewhere. And I think it is that, like you say, that fail fast, that creating a psychologically safe space to go, it's okay to edge your bets. It's all about risk appetite. It's all about making sure we're making relatively educated risks, hopefully, and then learning from them and taking the bits that went well and looking again at what could we do differently with the things that didn't work, because very often it's not the whole idea that didn't work, it's the execution of the idea which let it down, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've got two thoughts going through my mind. I'll try and do both, but on the kind of whole lessons learned piece, lessons learned is one thing. I think lessons applied is even better. And often that's the bit that people forget, because you learn the lessons after something's gone wrong, but you apply the lessons before you do something. And often that's the point at which you forget to go back and think, oh, what about all those things that went wrong? Oh, well, actually, you can learn good lessons as well. So that's the first thing. But the other thing I was thinking is you were talking about kind of quotes from films and so on. And immediately I was remembering the film Dumb and Dumber, if you remember that.
Yes.
And it's very childish film in some ways, but there's a great moment in it where, for people who haven't seen it, there's this guy, he's chased this lady across the whole country, basically, because he wants to ask her out on a date. And when he eventually gets there, and he's kind of pitching out of his league, right, in this, and he kind of says to her, you know, what's the chances of, you know, us getting together? And she kind of says, well, look, it's not good. And he's like, well, not good, like 1 out of 100. And she's like, no, more like 1 out of 1,000,000. And he goes, so you're telling me there's a chance? And I love that because it's this thing about, you know, being optimistic. Yeah, you know, and whilst it might, a 1 in a million might sound like a bad chance, I'm not being funny, but people play, you know, the lottery or things like that with far worse chances than that, far worse odds. But when it comes to, you know, taking a risk personally or professionally, often we really want the odds to be stacked in our favor. But the truth is, some of the best successes personally and professionally have come from some of the biggest risks. So sometimes we've just got to, I would say, I'm glass 3/4 full. You know, you've got to be optimistic.
Yeah. It's so true, isn't it? And it's how we frame it. You know, and I always say to people, it always makes me smile when we have that saying, don't we? You're either glass half full or glass half empty. And I'm like, it's a glass. You can refill it. It's like, so why don't we look at it from the fact it's refillable? In which case, it can be the best glass that we want. But we've just got to keep going. And I'd love your thoughts on this. I was, as you know, I've got a little girl who's 8, and I was reading somewhere the other week about a study that they'd done with 2 groups of children, and one group were being praised for success. So every time they got something right, yeah, brilliant, great praise. The other group were being praised for trying. Whether they succeeded or not, they were being praised because they kept trying, because they kept going. And over time, what they identified is that the group that were being praised for trying outperformed significantly the group that were being praised for success, because actually they'd created in them a fear of failure. So they were less willing to try something that wasn't, to your earlier point, stacked in their favor. You know, if I don't think the odds are good, I'm just going to sit here, not going to take part, because I don't want to lose my perfect score. Whereas the people that were trying were like, well, that's okay, I'm going to get brownie points for trying. I just love to know your thoughts on those two.
Yeah, I think I'm not surprised by the outcome of what you've described, because the truth is that whether we like it or not as humans, we're quite responsive to the environment that surrounds us. You know, we like to conform to, you know, the norms and the expectations. And that's why some of those earliest years are so important. You know, there's often this idea about learning through play and exploration and so on. It's part of the reason why I'm kind of against, on a kind of values level, I'm kind of against kind of curricula in school which are kind of predetermined and say, you know, this is the knowledge you should have, this is these are the skills you should have at different ages, kind of particularly for that first 10 years. Because I think by doing that, what we kind of do is we block off the opportunity to learn anything outside of that. We kind of say, well, that doesn't matter so much, or that's less important. And effectively we pre-program lots of people. And there are so many people I've met in their early careers or even later careers who have been successful because they've somehow had to undo some of that to kind of you know, relearn things again. And it's one of the things I think is so important, if you can do it, is not the ability to actually learn something new. It's the ability to learn, unlearn and relearn, you know, and constantly do that all the way through, because that's the only way you can really get on, because things change.
Yeah, it's so true. And I was actually pondering on this again with my little girl, but you know, in her class, she's got a number of children who English isn't their first language. And some of them are like, you know, they're multiple languages. And I mean, amazing. What an amazing skill. But I was talking to one of the mums and she was like, oh, I'm really sorry, my English isn't that good. And I said, please never apologize. I can only speak one language. I'm blown away that you've managed to learn a second one. And you are so eloquent in it and so fluent. I said, but I love the way that therefore your brain is able to look at one thing, so say it's this glass, and immediately have more than one label for it. Because once we get our brains in that space that's going, well, I could call it this, but I could call it that as well, because both of those are true. And just because one's right doesn't make the other one wrong. We're just looking at it from a different perspective. Then actually, we really do open ourselves up to the art of the possible, don't we? And it is in that, to your point, in that ability to relearn something that says, well, maybe it could be called more than one thing. Maybe there is a different way of doing it. Maybe, you know, I've always thought that, just like Einstein said, that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. I've also thought the same of every thought we have. Of every thought we have, there is an equal and opposite thought. And once we open ourselves up to that, then actually we start to see a 360, which allows us to be more curious and open-minded about what's going to come next. Is that something that you see in kind of how we can start to better augment education and enterprise to be able to unlock the art of the possible?
Yes, and I think it goes beyond just language as well. I think having different perspectives on things is helpful. But, you know, we all know, for example, there are certain expressions that exist in certain cultures, in certain languages, that don't exist in English in that sense. And so, you know, that having that language opens up this whole other world of concepts and perspectives, which can then play into the kind of enterprise piece as well, because then you can start to articulate things in different ways, or to think about things in different ways. And if you can really eloquently switch between those, then that's very powerful indeed. I don't know many people who can do that, but the few that I do know are, you know, they do exceptionally well for themselves.
Yeah, I know. I love that, and you're right. It's not that common, but when you see somebody who can do it, it really does open your eyes to just what could be done differently if we became less wedded to being right. You know, as leaders, certainly the way I was brought up and taught to be a leader, you've got to know the answers. Like, you know, heaven forbid you don't know the answer, but you can't possibly know the answer to every question, and all you really need to know is the right question to ask. And it kind of struck me, I don't know if you've heard the Henry Ford story, but he took the Chicago paper to court for slander, because they basically called him an uneducated buffoon. And whilst he was in the courtroom, the other lawyers, the newspapers lawyers, asked one after another of really impertinent questions to demonstrate that he was uneducated. And after a particularly bad one, he said, "Can I just stop you there? In my office, on my desk, there is a big electronic box. And based on whichever button I press, I can summon to me somebody who can answer any question I need to know the answer to. So why would I fill my head with all the things that you think I need to know?" And at that point, everybody realized that's not the answer of an uneducated man. That's the answer of an educated man. And that always struck me in that part that says, actually, that's where good leadership is in that ability to ask the right question of the right people. Would you say that's fair?
I think that's right. I think it's also about having the kind of culture in an organization where it's okay not to know all the answers. You know, I've been in organizations where the way you get on is by knowing more than the people below you, and you don't want those people to find out what you know, because otherwise you know, that could be your job at risk. You know, I hated that.
Yeah.
I almost pride myself now on not being the expert in things. And it's helpful because you can ask the stupid questions, which are often turned out not to be stupid questions. And how empowering is it, you know, when you have a leader who says, you know, let me introduce you to our experts, you know, in different parts of the business. This is really, really powerful. My job, as I see it, is to get the best out of other people, not to be the font of all knowledge.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that is where we need to kind of encourage more leaders to be, is that, you know, how do we encourage our team to be the experts, and therefore we're just the director that's like, okay, this person is the expert here and this is how they can bring it. And you know, I used to say that I built my entire career on asking the dim girl questions, you know, the really obvious ones. Why do we do this? And one of my favorites going into an organization was always to ask the people, what's the daftest thing we make you do every day? What do we do that you go, this is just ridiculous? And they were like, why? So, because I guarantee we don't know you're doing it. So you think
Yes.
you, but we don't know. So it is our hiding in plain sight area that we can resolve quite quickly because we think we know, and I promise you we don't. But it's having that courage, isn't it, to take that step, to move forward and go, do you know what, actually, I'm here to learn. I loved when they brought in reverse mentorship and started to really encourage people to go, actually keep learning. Don't think, well, I already know it all now, and face what most of us fear, which is becoming irrelevant again.
Yeah, I think it's also calling things out when that we need to stop. There's a great, I think it was a meme going around. It's called the dead horse meme, and it's basically a picture of like the dead horse on the kind of the conference room table, and all the executives are sitting around this dead horse saying, maybe if we change the saddle, would that work? Or we could give it a haircut, and it's basically talking about how they revived this dead horse. And then you've got the CEO there basically says, guys, the horse is dead. Like we need a different horse. Like we need to do something else. And I think that's important as well, because sometimes people will see calling time on something as oh, it's failed, it's gone wrong. It was actually the real failure is continuing to do something that's clearly not working. In my mind, that's part of it. So as a leader, you're in a unique position to give permission, if you like, to call time on something. And so I feel very privileged to have that responsibility, and I take that very seriously. To call it out when the time comes.
Oh, I think what a great meme. I'm going to have to look for that, because it's true. So often we sit in meetings and we're having these rounded conversations where you're like, but have we taken a step back? I remember years ago now, probably nearly 20 years ago now, being sat in one such meeting, and I'd been there for about 5-6 minutes, and they were debating the declining sales of paper payslips. And I remember saying to them, can I just ask a question? Can I ask, do we think we're stupid, or do we think the customer's stupid? And they went, well, I said, you can ask that question. What do you mean? And I said, well, let's park for a second. Can I ask you, how do we pay our people? What kind of pay slips do we use? And I went, electronic ones. I went, okay, great. Why do we do that? Well, they're environmentally friendly and they're economical. I said, okay, so we think we've made a pretty good decision. Yeah, great. So why do we think our customers aren't going to make the same logical decision that we did, and also move to electronic because they are environmentally friendly and they're economical? And they went, oh yeah, I see what you mean. I said, so you're arguing the wrong problem. The problem is you didn't see the trend move, and therefore you've added a revenue stream to our budget. So your issue is you didn't see it, and now instead of recognizing we're never going to fill it in the way that we thought, we need to find a new way, something else we can sell, something else that the customer actually wants. You're instead debating what color could we make the pay slips to make people buy them. It's like, no.
This is the dead horse. You're describing the dead horse. This is exactly it.
And it was that element of saying, how often are we fixing the wrong problem? Because and I'd love your experience on this. Is I see when often with companies, clients, and that I'm working with, we've forgotten that we're here to serve. So we're here to actually solve the problem the customer's got, and instead we start to look at the problem we've got to solve, which is we need to get more revenue, or we need to get a better profit margin, or we need to do something else. And it's like, that is what we need to do. But if we take our eye off solving the problem for the customer will not be a customer because they'll go somewhere where someone's going to solve their problem. Is that something you see?
Yeah, and I think that's why you see a lot of businesses now that have these more customer-centric models. It's why you have kind of product owners rather than kind of traditional functions in a lot of businesses now, because that makes you focus on the customer and personas and these types of things, so to kind of make you get that right. It's really interesting, isn't it? One of the things I see as a kind of consequence of what you've just described is this thing where businesses have solutions. And then it's almost like they go around looking for problems to solve. I think AI is a bit like that, actually. Don't you think AI? Everyone tells me that AI is a great solution, And we kind of come at it the wrong way. It's AI's looking for a problem to solve.
Yeah.
Start with the problem. As you say, what does the customer actually want? What are their pain points and gain points? How do we make their life easier or harder? And then that will drive the thing that's going to sell the most. So yeah, I think we're on exactly the same page on that one.
It's so true. It is in that reframing, isn't it? I remember once standing up at a town hall, which probably to this day I can still remember my poor boss's face, like horrified. I was the UK head of sales, so I understand why. Because I stood up and said to everybody, the first thing you need to understand is nobody actually wants our product. And they all just looked at me and went, what on earth? I said, they don't want it, they need it. We're selling accounting software. Unless you're an accountant, you did not go into business to do accounts. You need to do accounts. You have to do them legally to continue to operate. I said, but you're never going to create a desire in me. I'm never going to get excited about lock date or something. That's just not going to happen. What you will get me excited in is labeling me to do my accounts in a legally and correct way in a third of the time, because that's 2/3 of the time I can invest in doing what I want to do in my business, which is the bit that's really good. I said, but until you recognize the difference between what they want and what they need, you're never going to connect, are you?
I think that's right, and you're kind of articulating there as well that difference between what I think of as like outcomes or outputs and benefits. Mm-hmm. And often I think there's the way in which we measure success in business is often we measure the outcomes or the outputs. How many sales have you got? What we're less good at measuring is to what extent did the solution that we provided deliver the intended benefits to the customer, partly because it's harder to measure and there aren't clear metrics, but that's the thing that's really going to make a difference. The great example that always comes to mind for me of this is it's a Dutch example, so forgive me, this is slightly Dutch humor which may or may not land. There's a medical analogy they use over there where they talk about a surgeon doing an operation, and this is how they describe a situation where all of the outputs are delivered exactly, but it delivers none of the benefits. They say the operation was successful, the patient is dead. And essentially what they're trying to describe there is they've delivered exactly what they were supposed to do in the right way, but actually that wasn't really what the customer wanted in that situation.
Yeah. That's a great analogy. I mean, that really brings it home, doesn't it? It's like I did all the bits that you told me to do, but still, nope. Didn't work. Customer is definitely not happy about that, and I think it's I think with a lot of that, and I was reflecting on what you were saying about the metrics and what gets measured gets done, but sadly often what gets measured is what can be measured, not what should be measured, and then it becomes distortionately important because it's the thing that we can measure. Would you say that's fair? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I see that all the time. I actually particularly see it in governments. So it's not just businesses. You see it in politics, right? Because people want to prove how successful they are, so they go for the things that they can measure. The classic is hospital waiting times. Now, is it the waiting times that are the problem? I mean, yes, it's annoying having to wait, but is that really the problem? Would people wait a bit longer if they knew they were definitely going to get better, for example? Yeah. But you can't measure that so easily, right? Government targets and public kind of targets are often fall into this trap as well. So it's the public sector, the private sector, and also charities as well. I think they all kind of fall in this to some respect.
It's so true, because we end up in that place, don't we? And I think whatever we are, whether we're public sector, private sector, third sector, we've still got to make all the numbers work. We still have to balance the books. We still have to make sure we're not insolvent, and we might be spending that in different ways, but we have to do it. And one of the things that I found in my career is that the problem shows up in the numbers. So we go and look at the numbers, well, there's the problem, we've got a big issue here or here, but it always manifests in the people. So it shows up over here, but actually it's being caused by the people. And I don't mean that they're doing it on purpose. So we've suddenly hired a whole team of terrorists who want to go in the opposite direction, but actually it's usually because of misinformation, misunderstanding, or miscommunication, because they're wanting to do the right thing. And I've seen that even more so often when we are in specific projects, often because they are by nature a form of transformation or change. And as you said at the start of the show, we really like change, a lot of us, do we? And even the people that like change still have to go through change. You know, they've still got to take themselves through learning to do it differently. So is there any tips you could share with us and with the people watching on how can you mitigate some of that?
Yeah, so I think part of this is about deciding which battles to fight, because you're always going to see changes in the data. You're always going to see things, problems that you could fix, but not everything is fixable, and not everything is fixable all in one go. So the best bit of advice someone ever gave to me, and it's stayed with me, is, Adam, you've got to pick your battles. They have to be small enough to win, but big enough to make a difference. And if they don't fall into that sweet spot, you've got to leave it well alone. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant advice. And I've used it so many times, and it's really, really incredibly powerful.
I love that. That is great advice. I often say as well, it's not just picking your battles, it's also picking your battlefield, because depending on where you choose to have the conversation will have a significant impact on the outcome that you get. If you're going to take somebody on in the middle of a team meeting, they're going to shut you down a lot faster than if you take them to one side and have a conversation about what needs to change.
Yeah, you're right there. Do you know, it's funny, I remember I was doing a review of corporate governance in an organization once, and there was a board and the executive, and the relationships were quite challenging for a whole host of reasons. And I spoke to the executive team, and they said, I don't know what's wrong with the board. They always seem to have an issue. And I spoke to the board, and they said, the executive team are always very defensive. And I said, well, in your opinion, why do people tend to be defensive? And the answer, of course, was people are defensive if they think they're under attack. And and that was what we had to deal with. And it was all to do with, as you say, where you have certain conversations in the boardroom versus in private. And they hadn't understood that that challenge and criticism are different things. That you can challenge something in a kind of non-critical way. Sometimes it's asking a question. Can you tell me more about, rather than I think you're wrong because. And I try to use that in my day-to-day life. I always say to people, what I like to hear from you is I can if, rather than I can't because. And that's just a reframing of how you approach something. It makes a massive difference.
Oh, Adam, that's amazing and such great advice, because actually when we do frame it slightly differently, then people, to your point, can feel challenged but not criticised. And I think that's so important. I cannot believe we're at the end of the show. I've just looked up and gone, Dr. Jacalyn will be killing me in a moment because we're going to overrun. It has been such a delight to have you on the show again. And could I ask you, before you go, can you share with us how people can get in touch with you and who you help?
Of course, yeah. So we're a membership association for project managers. So that's that. And I also do education consultancy as well. The web addresses are adambodderson.com or apm.org.uk. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find at Adam Bodderson.
Fabulous. Adam, it's been an absolute joy. I always love our conversations. You share such insight and you weave it into stories, which makes it so much easier for people to take the learning. So thank you again for coming and spending more time with us, and I look forward to our next conversation.
It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you for having me.
Take care. And to everybody listening and watching, I hope you found today's episode as insightful and impactful as I have. And until next time, take care.
Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to Story Garden. Your host, Diane Boehm. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Diane Floyd Boehm tells wonderful stories that warm the heart, spark the imagination, and unite people and families across generations. For children, Diane's Harry the Camel connects with all of us who've ever wondered how different our lives might have been if only we'd been born something better, like a wonderful horse instead of an ordinary camel. In the end, we all learn along with Harry that there's nothing better than just being yourself. Diane's little girl in the moon looks down on earthbound children and wonders if they know she's just like them. A story of love, home, and the bond between mother and daughter, its powerful theme that we're each of us different yet all of us the same plants a seed in children that promises to blossom within a loving and trusting grown-up. Diane's new biography, Rise, recounts the experiences of her grandmother, Ruby, to reveal the hidden strength of the human spirit. Ruby's story inspires all of us to become the best versions of ourselves. You'll find all of Diane's delightful books and much more at dianefloydbame.com. Visit dianefloydboehm.com. That's dianefloydbame.com.
What if one simple skill could change the way you connect with the world? What if listening could open doors to deeper relationships, stronger businesses, and a better you? Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, the Listening Mentor, brings you USA Global TV and Radio, a space where voices are heard, ideas are shared, and global communities thrive. Through the elevated listeners' courses and books, you'll master the power of listening, set boundaries with confidence, and transform conversations into opportunities. Join us. Listen, learn, elevate. Whether you're a leader, a coach, a business owner, or someone seeking stronger connections, your journey starts today. Subscribe, learn, and transform today.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA-Global-TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Music by Johnny Dies. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative Direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Copyright 2025. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.